Skillshare is for designers, photographers, marketers, artists, and lifelong learners. Skillshare is for foodies, commuters, risk takers, the young, and the young at heart. It's for strategists, free spirits, purists, the bold, the curious, the characters, the makers, and the breakers. Skillshare is for everyone, an online learning community with thousands of classes to advance your career, improve the world, and pursue the work you love. What will you learn next? It all starts on Skillshare.
In this lecture, we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. And I'll explain in a moment what it is, and we'll be going through this and you'll start to see what it is that we mean by this. But first let me say this is very important. This is a very important area of writing and of speech too. It immediately jumps out at the reader if you lack subject-verb agreement. So first, you want your subjects and your verbs to agree. Okay, so what is subject-verb agreement? Maybe one of the ways to best explain it is to just illustrate what it's not. So as we see from a couple of the samples here, if I were to say something to you as, I teaches English, well, you'd immediately doubt my ability to do so. Because my subject does not agree with my verb. You see, they don't go together. And as we see in the heading up above, that's another way to think of it. They go together. They go together naturally. They belong together. So it would be incorrect to say, I teaches English. The correct form, of course, would be, I teach English. And likewise, if someone said, he run fast, well, the correct form would be, he runs fast. Or if someone were to say, you has driven, well, again, correctly, one should say, you have driven. You see, so that's what we mean by agreement, that the forms naturally go together. And we could get technical, that the first person subject should be matched by a first person verb, and the second person subject matched by a second person verb, and the third person subject matched by a third person verb. But for now, we'll start to work through this, and I hope that you'll start to see what we mean by agreement. And again, another way to phrase it would be the subject and the verb go together. Okay. In English, agreement is simple. Subject-verb agreement is relatively simple. There are relatively few changes to the verb in English, and we can see that most of the changes occur in the third person singular. That is, when you're talking about a single person other than yourself or other than the person that you're talking to. So, you would say something like, I go, you go, he, she, or it goes. And again, we see the examples over here on the side. You would say, I walk, you walk, he, she, or it walks. You see, so you notice what we're doing. We're adding the S to the end of the third person singular verb, okay? And even with the verb to have, it's a little bit different, but you can kind of stretch your imagination and see that it's really the same thing. I have, you have, he, she, or it has. So we lose the V, but you see the same idea. You add the S. Okay, now there is an exception, and we'll talk about that. But agreement is simple in English, and so that's the easy part. Now, as we go forward, we're going to encounter, I'm going to discuss ways in which we make mistakes, areas that this agreement, albeit simple agreement, is confused, and so we make mistakes. But at least to start off, want you to understand that agreement is relatively simple. Now, I said a few moments ago that we do have one exception in English to the simplicity rule, and that is the verb to be. We see here in the chart to the side here the different forms that the verb takes. So I would say I am, you are, he, she, or it is. See, so we have three changes right there. And then, of course, in the plural, the verb takes the form are, we are, you are, they are. Similarly, in the past tense, we have a couple changes that we need to be aware of. I was, you were, he, sure, it was, and then were is used in all the forms of the plural. We were, you were, they were. So this is the exception to the simplicity rule, the rule, I guess, that has it that in the present tense, at least, there's only one change, and that is for the third person singular. She walks. Something like that. Okay, so anyway, so this is the exception, and we need to pay attention to it. And as we go forward, as I said, we are going to be taking a look at the places where we make mistakes in spite of the simplicity of agreement in English. We do not have a problem with agreement in the past tense. There is no changing of the verbs. There's no conjugation of the verbs into different forms, no matter who we're referring to is doing the action. So for instance, the example that we have here, and you should be used to my going like this by now. Okay. I walked, you walked, he walked, we walked, you walked, they walked. So you notice, and this of course is the regular verb to walk. But there's no changing, and no matter what the form of the verb, whether it's a regular or irregular verb, and we should be familiar with that, what that means now, what those terms mean, there is no changing the verb in the past tense. So we can be thankful for that small benefit, and we're going to go forward and we're going to launch into where the difficulties arrive. So where is the problem with subject-verb agreement? It all seems to be very simple. The answer is it's not in simple constructions. Nobody writes I goes or he are or other types of mislocutions like this. The problems arise in more complicated constructions. And we're going to see that as we go forward, and there's several, and I'm going to take you through, I'm going to walk you through one by one what those more complicated constructions are, where we make mistakes, and also take a look at how to avoid those mistakes in our writing. Okay, so the first instance that I'm going to discuss is what might be called a hidden subject, and we have this type of phenomenon when words appear between the subject and the verb and might confuse us as to what the subject is, or might confuse the ear. So we have an example here. The incorrect form would be the woman baking cookies appear happy. Okay, so I don't know if you picked up on what's happening there, but you'll see that the subject is not cookies but woman, but that's what the verb agrees with. You see, the verb is made to agree incorrectly with cookies. Cookies appear happy. And so it might be that our ear picks up the S, cookies. He picks up the plural, and then we kind of automatically, maybe without thinking, make the verb agree with cookies. But that is incorrect. And you see in the diagram with the arrow going from woman to appears, that is the subject-verb relationship, and it's woman that appears, the verb appear should agree with. The woman appears. Now, one way to correct against this type of error is what's called the drop test. I'm going to come back to the drop test, and what this means is the drop test, you drop out, or in this case, you cross out the words that intervene between the subject and the verb. So try it. You see, you can go, the woman appears happy. You see, baking cookies is not part of the subject. That's a phrase that that modifies woman. Which woman it is? Is it? Well, it's a woman who is baking cookies, right? But that phrase, baking cookies, is not part of the subject and has no effect on the verb. Okay, so that's the first area of error in misagreement between or disagreement between subject and predicate. The next area of mistaken agreement is in phrases that look like they're part of the subject but aren't. That is, phrases that look like they might be actually forming a plural, but they don't really. And these are phrases something like along with. So we see the example here. The coach, along with all the players, are celebrating the team's victory. So what would be correct? The coach, along with all the players, are celebrating the team's victory, or the coach, along with all the players, is celebrating the team's victory? Well, the key is that that phrase, along with, does not add to the subject. So it's the coach who is celebrating the team's victory. He happens to be doing it with all the players, but the subject-verb relationship is between the coach and the verb. The coach is. One of the areas of confusion is not only does it confuse the ear, it might confuse the ear, so we hear players are celebrating. But then logically as well, we are talking about the coach and the players. In fact, if we said the coach and the players, the correct verb would be are celebrating. But this is a special case. The along with form, and there's a few other words that that fall into this category, does not add to the subject. And so again, we can do the drop test. And we see the illustration here where we do the drop test. And perhaps you can see clearly what it is that I'm talking about. The subject-verb relationship is between the coach is celebrating the team's victory. And that's what we have to remember, that this along with is not a conjunction such as and. It doesn't add to the subject. It doesn't create a plural subject. The subject remains, in this case, singular. To continue from the previous slide, and just speak a moment longer about the along with construction, you will see that there's a few other types of phrases like this that act in the same way. And along with, aside from, as well as, and many others that you can see in the text. But these types of construction, again, do not add to the subject. So we have another example. The teacher, along with the students, is late. So you notice the teacher is late. Do the drop test. The teacher is late. However, if we had said the teacher and the students are late, we would say are late. They are late. You see? But in the first instance, in the first example, it's the teacher who is late. You know, maybe another way to see it would be we could put that phrase along with the students first. Along with the students, comma, the teacher is late. Maybe you can see it a little bit more clearly if we do it that way. But anyway, just remember, these types of constructions do not add to the subject. This is a form that causes a lot of problems. And again, because of some of the reasons that I've said before, the ear is fooled. There are intervening words between the subject and the predicate. But I'll test you. Which do you think is correct? One of your problems is too many meetings on your schedule, or one of your problems are too many meetings on your schedule? What sounds correct to you? In the next slide, I'll discuss which one is correct and why. To begin to answer the quiz, one of the problems is, okay, because remember, in this type of formation, a very simple way to think of it is nothing behind the of is ever the subject. Okay, so the subject is, in this case, one. So we can see from the illustration to the side that one of the billions of stars in the sky is Andromeda. And you can do the drop test. One is Andromeda. Okay. One of the issues we will discuss is global warming. Again, do the drop test. You cross off one of the issues we will discuss. Okay. So whatever is in front of the of is the subject. Okay, the of is a prepositional phrase. The of builds a prepositional phrase, and that is never the subject. And you can test this yourself. Could you say of the billions of stars in the sky is Andromeda? That wouldn't make much sense, would it? It's one of the billions of stars in the sky. Now, of course, you can also say two of your problems are, and we're going to get to that in the next slide, in which case the subject would be two. Okay, but in this case, this is the case that causes us the most problems. One of, the subject is one, and if you just remember that one rule, maybe that's what we should call it, the one rule. Okay, but just remember that, and you can always test it with the drop test. To follow along with what we have been talking about, the of construction, the one of, or in this case, we're going to look at two of and three of, and etc. But remember, none of the words behind the of affects the subject-verb relationship. So that's very important, a general rule to remember. So we have some examples here. Two of the items on the agenda are global warming and the menu for the conference. Or would you rather have two of the items on the agenda is global warming and the menu for the conference? Well, if you remember the rule, nothing behind the of ever affects the subject-verb relationship, we can do the drop test, and you'll see that the correct form would be two are global warming and the menu for the conference. You see, so two are. Okay, one is, two are. Okay, so it's kind of the extension of what we've been talking about, you know, the of construction, the prepositional phrase, except instead of having a one of a type of construction, we have a two of, and so on and so forth. Okay, so always remember this. Nothing behind the of in this type of construction ever affects the subject-verb relationship. Next, we'll go on to what's called the expletive construction, and this is the construction that starts with there is, there are, it is, those types of phrases. One of the things to keep in mind is that the there or the it is, in this type of construction, is not the subject of the sentence. So the verb is not agreeing with the there or the it. As we see over here, there is a reason to be concerned. There are reasons to be concerned. It is a wild horse. The there or the it in these cases is not the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence would be what follows the verb. That's why we say there is a reason to be concerned. Okay, there are reasons. Reasons are. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? The verb agrees with, in this case, the noun that follows. It is a wild horse. Okay, so the wild horse or the horse would be the subject of the sentence, and that's what the verb agrees with. This is the expletive construction. I'll just explain a moment longer about the expletive construction, why it is that that the noun is following the verb. In English, it is not possible to say something like is a reason to be concerned, is a wild horse. Okay, English requires there to be a subject, or if there's not a subject, in this case, in this expletive construction, at the beginning of the noun subject phrasing, English requires there to be a kind of a dummy subject. So that's why we have the there is construction. So remember, the there is, the it is, the there are, that's not the subject of the sentence. And as a matter of fact, if we put the phrase into normal order, what we call normal order, that is subject, verb, order, instead of saying there are reasons to be concerned, you could say reasons are there to be concerned. So you see how that worked. Or a reason is there to be concerned. So if you put it into, what might be normal order, considered normal order, even though it might sound a little funny, but just for demonstration purposes, we put it into that order. You see how the verb changes because of the changing from, in this case, the noun reason to reasons. Reason is, reasons are. So I hope that makes this clear. And so that's why we have what's called this expletive construction. you must remember that uncountable nouns are always singular. So we have some examples over here. The water is cold. Milk tastes good with cookies. The air pollution is heavy today. See, all of those are uncountables, and so they're singular. And this is not to be confused with saying something like, I'd like 3 waters, please. You're in a restaurant, and how many waters do you want? How many people are going to be at the table? I'd like 3 waters, please. You're not really saying 3 waters. You're really saying 3 glasses of water. It's not the waters that are plural. It's the containers that the waters are in. So don't confuse, this mixed usage or this variable usage of a word like water. You would not be able to say the waters are cold. Well, you could, but then you'd be referring to perhaps the waters around Antarctica and the waters around the Arctic Circle. You see 2 different bodies of waters. Okay, so anyway, so just remember, generally speaking, uncountable nouns are singular. Another place that we might make a mistake is when, for dramatic effect, we might invert, that is, change around the normal word order between the subject and the predicate, the noun and the verb. So we have an example here. Would you say, out of the darkening sky were swarming the alien spaceships, or out of the darkening sky was swarming the alien spaceships? Well, remember that if you have a construction like this, and sometimes you might do that for an effect, for a dramatic effect. Just imagine a movie in which you have a picture of the sky, the cloud-covered sky, and then all of a sudden the alien spaceships swarm out of the clouds. And so you're kind of building that kind of visual image through the use of words. And so, so that might be an instance in which you would use this inverted word order. But if you put it into normal order, normal subject-verb order, you would say something like, the alien spaceships were swarming out of the darkening sky. So you can see that the subject is ships and the verb is were. And the verb to be is properly conjugated as were. So just keep in mind that if you have this type of inverted word order, you have to be careful to, in this case, not make the verb agree with sky, the singular sky, but with the proper subject of the sentence, which in this case would be ships. Another place for potential confusion is there are a number of words that look like they're plural, but they're not. And they look like they're plural because, they sound plural, they end with an S. And so words like gymnastics or economics or General Motors. So, but these are singular. So it's the sport of gymnastics. So gymnastics is an exciting sport, not gymnastics are an exciting sport. Or economics is a difficult subject, not economics are. And General Motors is reporting increased earnings, not General Motors are. You see, because it's a single company. In the case of General Motors, it's not many companies, even though it takes an S ending. So just be aware that there are a few words that look like they're plural, but they're not, and so you use the singular verb to agree with them. Sometimes you have titles of films or books that again look like they're plural, but because you're regarding it as a title, the title itself is, right there I used the singular verb is regarded as a singular. So we have a few examples over here, a couple of examples. 300 is a film about the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 is, because I'm referring to it as a title. But if I said that 300 Spartans are defending their homeland against the Persian invaders, I'm referring to it as a number. So just be aware whether you're referring to the title or a number. And another example is 101 Dalmatians is a very funny Walt Disney movie. You see, 101 Dalmatians. I'm not referring to a bunch of dogs in the plural. I'm referring to a singular title. But if I were to say 101 Dalmatians are tearing up my front lawn, there I'd be using the plural, because I'm not referring to a title. I'm not referring to the movie or the book that is tearing up my front lawn, but an actual 101 spotted dogs are on my front lawn and they're tearing it up. So just remember, when you have a title, it is referred to in the singular, and not to confuse it with the plural form, even if it looks like it's plural. Collective nouns are most often singular. So these are group nouns. These are nouns that refer to a group. And there's an exception to this, or actually a big exception. Maybe the whole thing's an exception, or there are alternate ways of doing it. But let's just talk about first if collective nouns are singular. So in American English, collective nouns are singular. So you would say the company is releasing its year-end earnings. The team is in last place for the second season in a row. General Motors is announcing a rise in profits. The audience appreciates an entertaining speaker. So you see, so in this case, the collective nouns are all regarded as singular. In the next slide, I'll talk about an alternative way of looking at that. Okay, so, but in American English, we most often regard the collective noun as being a singular body, a single group, and we refer to it in the singular. So it takes the singular verb. One thing to take note of is that British usage, the collective nouns are often plural. So a way to illustrate this is to imagine that the sports pages are reporting a English victory in international soccer. And so American usage would have us read something like England wins with the S, the singular, you see, so we have the singular verb. England wins. The British usage would have something like England win, okay, as in they win. You see, so now maybe a way to rationalize this is that whereas in the American usage, Americans tend to look at the group as a singular group, whereas in British usage, very often the speakers or the language culture looks at the group as a collection of people. So it's not the singular team that wins, but it's all the members in the team that win. Okay, so anyway, just a variation on this. And so if you happen to be looking at this video from an area that adheres to more British usage, so perhaps this is the form that you should use. Otherwise, if you are in America or oriented towards American usage, you would regard the collective nouns as singular. So there's a group of nouns that look like they're plural, that is, they end with an S, which is a normal plural form, and the items are singular, but they take a plural verb, and these are words like scissors, pants, trousers, glasses, pliers, tongs, tweezers. So and very often these are used with a pair of, so a pair of scissors, a pair of pants, things like this. And even though there's only one item, as in pants, okay, and you would use the plural verb. So my pants are in the laundry. The scissors are sharp. So that's just something to remember. Think of these as the imposters. They pretend that they're plural, even though the items themselves are singular. A form that sometimes causes us a great deal of trouble is the form of or. So to start off, we should remember not to confuse or with and. And always adds. And if you have an and construction in the subject of a sentence, you're going to have a plural. Okay, the cat and the dog were eating. They were eating the Thanksgiving turkey. Okay, so the and creates a plural. Or, however, does not add. It doesn't add the two things. You only have a choice between one and the other. So it would be correct to say the dog or the cat was eating the turkey. They weren't both eating the turkey, one or the other. That is, only one was eating the turkey. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this as we go forward in the next couple slides, but remember, we have a special problem with the word or, because you have a choice between one or the other, not both. The rule to remember in the formation of the or subject phrase is that the nearest possible subject, that is the nearest possible noun, rules the verb. Okay, so that's where we get the subject-verb agreement. So take a look at the example that I have here. The students or the teacher was late, or would we say the students or the teacher were late? Okay, so remember, it's not the students and the teacher were late. Okay, so all of them together were late. Only one group or the other. You know, either the students were late or the teacher was late. And that last phrasing that I have there gives us a clue as to what it is that it forms the subject-verb relationship, the subject-predicate relationship. See, so it's the students or the teacher was late, because teacher is the nearest possible subject for the verb. And you see that I've printed in red, I've highlighted in red the subject-verb relationship. But if we rephrased it and we said the teacher or the students, we would say were late. They were late. The students were late. You see, so again, I've highlighted in red what the subject-verb relationship would be. Something to remember is that words such as each and everyone, anyone, anybody, these are always singular. These are called indefinite pronouns. That is, we're not quite specifying who exactly it is that we're talking about. We're talking about anyone. But they are singular. And the clue, maybe the mnemonic device to help us remember, is the one part. And even when the one isn't phrased, when we say each, we always say something like each student, each employee. These are always singular. And so the verb that goes with it, that is always singular as well. So everyone wants the biggest piece of cake. Every student who wants an A should study for the test. Anybody is welcome. Each member owes dues. You see, so those are all singular verbs. And so this in singular indefinite pronoun, and you can always remember it's singular because there's always a one either implied or actually expressed. So it's always singular and always takes a singular verb. Now I'm going to talk about what's called the relative pronouns. And we'll talk more about these when we talk about pronouns, but they are important now in terms of subject-verb agreement. And these are words such as who or whom, whoever, whomever, whose, that, which. These are words like this. And in essence, they pass through the subject-verb relationship. And so they don't directly affect the subject-verb relationship, but they pass it through. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment as we go to the next slide. What the relative pronouns do, and who, which, that, words like that, is they create in a sense, a sentence within a sentence. But they don't possess plural or singular properties in and of themselves. In essence, they reflect the property of the noun that they're related to. So in the one example that we have here, Fred Jones, who is late, did not call the front office. So you see that the is agrees with Fred Jones. Fred Jones is late. Okay, so you have to have that type of relationship, that the verb really isn't agreeing with who, it's agreeing with Fred Jones in this case. We could say, the dog that lives down the street saved the child from the pack of ravaging wolves. Okay, so again, lives agrees with dog. Okay, not with that. Okay, so, and again, doing the drop test, we could rephrase the sentence, the dog lives down the street. And again, one more example. The pizza, which was cold, tasted like boiled styrofoam. Okay, so, and again, we have the relationship, the pizza was cold. Okay, so there you have the subject-verb relationship. And and that's what you pay attention to. And that's what you make the verb agree with. That's inside the what's called the relative clause. Okay, so the relative pronoun doesn't directly affect the verb, but passes through, as it were, the relationship between the noun and the verb. And the last form that we're going to look at, yay, almost done. Okay. The last form we're going to look at is question words. And again, this is something like the expletive construction in that the question word, what or where or who, does not affect the verb. The subject-verb relationship is not between the question word and the verb, but between the verb and what follows. Okay, so the subject in what is the reason for your being late, the subject is reason. Okay, the reason is, we could rephrase it. Okay, what are the reasons that people smoke? So you notice when we change the plural form or change the the number form of the subject from singular to plural, the verb changes. Okay, so and again, we could rephrase it, the reasons are. So I hope you start to see that type of relationship. Where is my car? My car is where, you see, so that would be a possible way to phrase it. Or where are my keys? And keys is plural, so the verb that follows it has to be plural. So remember, question words do not directly affect the verb. They have no part in the subject-verb relationship, but the subject is what, in the question form, what follows the verb, not what precedes it. So we've come to the end of this lesson, at long last. So remember, subject-verb agreement is very important. And even though it's simple on the surface, and in simple constructions, it is simple. It's easy to follow. There are a lot of constructions that can confuse us, and we have to be aware of them. And I've tried to give you some of the tools that we can employ to help us maintain this proper subject-verb agreement. And again, I'll remind you that there is the text attached to this lesson, and there is the check your knowledge exercises that follow, that you'll be able to see if you truly do understand, as I hope you do at this point, the intricacies of this very important form in English grammar.